Perfect. Live on YouTube. I'll be live on LinkedIn. Live on LinkedIn. There we go, live on LinkedIn. And now let's share this with people on WhatsApp. Share this with people on WhatsApp. And there you go. And there you go. 211th episode of Thinker's Frequency. There it goes. There you go. You're live everywhere. That is pretty good. And perfect. So, message has been sent to people on WhatsApp. I am visible on LinkedIn. I'm visible on YouTube. And let me check my voice. There we go, live. Yeah, the voice is good on YouTube. Let's check the voice on LinkedIn. Yeah, it's good. It's good. So, there we go. Let's begin. The show that we deserve. Somebody sent a message and then retracted it. Bum bum bum. That is correct. Bum bum bum. Time for some bum bum bum. The beauty is that somebody told me a feedback. Mr. Bhavik Shah told me that people were not earlier being able to let's say rewind a live stream, which they are being able to do. And I didn't know if that was a specific setting that I needed to enable or something of that sort. So I was very confused. But then I found out that it's something called DVR. Now with DVR, you can essentially enable people's recording. I didn't know till 210 episodes. But it's time for the show that we deserve. It's time for the show of all shows. The show that sets us up in the morning, inspires us, informs us. It lets us stay ahead of the curve. It's time for Thinker's Frequency. Bum bum bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Thinker's Frequency. We're having such a good time. This is the peak of human civilization. We're working so hard, doing such good work for ourselves, our parents, our kids, our siblings, our husbands, our wives, our friends, everybody. Well, not other people's husbands and wives, I hope. And just when we thought things couldn't get any better, like they couldn't possibly get any better, well, they just did. Call it divine intervention, folks, but things just got a whole lot better. Now we have Thinker's Frequency. Our weekly mental workout. I keep confusing with it daily. Our weekly mental workout. Our weekly dose of insights and analysis that don't lead to paralysis right before we punch in. So let's continue with our journey of reading between the lines, things that are especially interesting and important in the world of business and finance. Let's go. Oh, but before we go, gotta follow tradition, right? You know the tradition? You know the sweet and sacred tradition of the simultaneous sip? We'll all sip something together, and it'll bring us good luck, as it always does, without fail, every day. And all you need for the simultaneous sip is a cup or mug, a glass, a tank, a chalice, a stein, a canteen jug, a flask, or a vessel of any kind. Pour it with your favorite liquid. I like some hot water with black pepper in it. And here we go. Simultaneous sip. Oh man, it's beautiful. It's wonderful. So nice. Let's do it again. Nice. Delicious. You know what the simultaneous sip says, right? You know what it says? It says that you are not alone. It says that we are in this together, which is such a beautiful thing to say. With that out of the way, let's begin. Mr. Vaibhav Manocha says, good to see you. Good to see you indeed. So, some really interesting things have been happening, but in the beginning, we'll begin with something which is interesting in an artful way, right? So, the Supreme Court recently gave an order for euthanasia. Euthanasia is essentially when somebody's put off life support and they can live, or they can pass away without pain. It's part of right to die. It's called right to die with dignity and so on and so forth. It's a very important concept on how you can pass away, right? If somebody is in a vegetative state. So in this case, there was this 32-year-old person who had fallen off the fourth floor and then got injured in such a way that it was quadrilipic, essentially paralysis, and that person was in a vegetative state. He couldn't respond to anybody for good 13 years, I guess. And so he was in a assisted state. Now, for the first time, Supreme Court essentially gave the order of euthanasia, so they can take the life support on and make sure that the person can pass away with integrity, right, and dignity intact. So that's euthanasia. It's very, very controversial. In the past, there have been a lot of cases where India essentially has been wary of this particular play. The judges came out with their poetry and stuff like this, right? They said, right to die and so on and so forth. Only one thing you control. Now, a very important film, a TV film related to this is called You Don't Know Jack. You Don't Know Jack is Al Pacino, directed by Barry Levinson, the director of Rain Man, the director of Sleepers, Bugsy, and so on and so forth. Great director. So he created a TV movie with Mr. Al Pacino, and that movie was called You Don't Know Jack, and it was based on Jack Caravan, the doctor who pioneered this whole right to die thing in US, right? So he essentially pioneered the entire paradigm of doctor assisted suicides, where people who had no hope of recovering or terminally ill, or people who were basically in a vegetative state, could be put to rest. And that story is so extraordinary that at the time it was illegal, right? So what he was doing didn't have a legal precedent, and in fact it was essentially a murder, right? And how that person gains notorious fame for this particular crusade, you can call it, and how he gets jailed. So Dr. Jack Caravan essentially gets jailed at the end, right? Getting a life sentence for pioneering right to die, because at that time, the first cases, he had a very good lawyer who essentially shielded him from any sort of legal rigmarole. But then he fell out with that lawyer, and then he represented himself in the court of law, and then the opposing party just nailed him down. And it was an extraordinary a movie. Extraordinary. It's just should be in the curriculum, right? Something like this should be in the curriculum. I'm very surprised, very sad that sometimes people miss out on these beautiful and very, very relevant, very intellectually relevant stories. Like, this is historically relevant, right? Right to die as a concept is extraordinary, and it outlines his whole journey when a lot of people who were just depressed came to him, and he said, "You can't do that because you know you are just depressed and you need to uh, take care of that. You don't need to die, essentially. You have a life you can live, right? Somebody who's burnt and so on and so forth, right? So he basically became, the opposing forces said that he was being playing God, right? Only God decides whether you live or you die. And he essentially started playing God. So you don't know Jack, very, very important movie. Everybody should watch it. I hope you find time to have a look at it. Speaking of lawyers, right? Abhishek Manu Singhvi, the lawyer, he declared assets of 2,500 crores for his Rajya Sabha bid. He was basically applying for Rajya Sabha nomination from Congress, right? 2,500 crores. What do I keep telling you about lawyers make money? Don't I keep telling you about lawyers make money, folks? Do you remember that? Lawyers make money. This is the same lawyer, by the way, who was like caught on video having intercourse with the lawyer in the legal chamber. So it was very disgusting. But he is clearly raking in a lot, and this essentially is a paradigm, right? So if you look at 2,500 crores of assets now, this is not 2,500 crores in net worth of, let's say, a tech entrepreneur, most of which is tied in stocks, right? So let's say if you look at a tech entrepreneur who's worth $2 billion, right, in India, right? Most of what he owns, most of what he's worth is essentially tied to the stock of his company. He can't sell the stock, of course, right? He can't, because if he sells the stock, his company essentially will tank, right? So the stock will essentially become worth less. In many cases, there are acquisition targets. So the man itself, the stock he has, he can liquidate, but most of the time that is illiquid worth, right? When lawyers make that kind of money, most of it is liquid, individually governed worth. So that is a pretty interesting, contrast that you will see. People making money in service businesses make money, right? People making money in different kind of businesses, their wealth is often tied to the ventures that they are building, which is paper money, as they say, right? So paper money, real money, very different cases. And in this case, it was real money. And this, once again, brings us to a lot of cases. Makes me want to switch careers, says Mr. Vaibhav Manocha. Lawyers make money, right? That catchphrase has actually caught on. Simultaneous sip is, of course, late Scott Adams, sir, but lawyers make money is ours, and people are starting to use that, which is so awesome, right? So now let's come to the financial rigmaroles that are happening, right? A lot of cases, we'll come to that, but financially, what did you look at last week? Last week, you looked at on Monday, the stocks fell, right? They had a bloodbath. On Tuesday, they recovered. On Wednesday, they fell. On Thursday, they fell again, but some of them recovered. So it was literally a zigzag pattern which played out in the last week. Even the gold prices fell a little. Now, why did the stocks or why did the markets essentially react so unfavorably to whatever is happening? Why did they fall on Monday, rise on Tuesday, fall on Wednesday, then fall on Thursday with some sectors picking up? Why did that happen and what will happen now? So the thing is that a lot of people are alleging market manipulation by manipulating news. So the reason why everything sort of stocks started gaining, right, was because US said that they have passed a ship through the Strait of Hormuz, which essentially signaled that Iran has lost control over Strait of Hormuz, which essentially signaled that Iran has lost the war. Now, if Iran has lost the war, if the war has come to a quick conclusion, that essentially gave people an idea that, okay, now the tides are behind us, the clouds are behind us, rejoice, right? Time to rejoice. Well, that turned out to be fake news. And so the first oil went up to 100, then oil went down to 84, then oil starting to climb up again. And then, so that's what's happening. That was the reason why markets sort of tumbled like in a very crazy zigzag fashion, right? Now, why did gold fall out? Any hypothesis you have on why gold essentially fell? Now, if you look at the market's return And if you look at gold, gold is still doing much better, of course, right? But even in this era of uncertainty, gold should have risen a lot, says the mind, right? Thinks. But it didn't. So it also essentially started falling, and then it came back up again, and then it eased that. So why do you think gold essentially fell off a little, right? It's a very interesting reason for it. And there's a very interesting reason for it. And once you know that reason, I mean, it's not hard to predict. I mean, you can actually think about it. You can hypothesize on why that would have happened. So I'll give you a shot. Let me take a sip till then. Let's have like a 5 second break for you guys. Why do you think that happened, folks? Come on, come on, come on. Speaking of lawyers, folks, there's another good movie which I should tell you. It's about lawyers. It's about the legal system. It's called And Justice for All. And Justice for All. Al Pacino yet again. Beautiful film. It's just extraordinary film on about how one lawyer tries to be a part of a legal system which is corrupted. So that is And Justice for All, 1979, Al Pacino, great movie. Al Pacino at that time starred in a lot of movies which were very system commentaries. Like Serpico was another movie, which was a real life story, by the way, about a cop who doesn't take any bribes, right? And the whole police system just gets screwed, right? And it tells that story on how that particular cop is treated just because he refuses to take bribes. Beautiful movie. Serpico and Justice for All was about this particular lawyer. So yeah, we were saying, and there are two comments. One is by Mr. Tushar Tiwari. He says war is about to end. Second is Mr. Vaibhav Manocha. Gold was already at all-time highs. Well, these reasons are not exactly relevant to what happened, specifically. So I'll tell you. First of all, war is not about to end. In all likelihood, this war is going to stay. It's not going anywhere so quickly, right? Iran says that we're going to take the crude to $200, and then the whole world will know. And Iran says we're going to keep attacking the neighboring countries and US bases and stuff like that. Iran says, the son says, I had the honor of looking at my father's body when he died, and his fist was clenched as he passed away, and so on and so forth. So clearly, Iran is not going to back out, and they seem to have some sort of, firepower remaining. There's a lot of military theories going on around. We'll not get into that because most of the news which comes during this particular time is in a fog of war situation, right? Fog of war is the peak time for all fake news. All sorts of fake news is at all-time highs when the matter is still pending, right? So we're not gonna speculate on Iran's military strength, but what we can confidently say is that it's not gonna end as soon as, let's say, Trump would like it to end, right? He's a TV guy, 12-day war, and so on and so forth. That's not gonna happen when it comes to this particular play. And then Mr. Vaibhav Manocha's comment when he says gold is already at an all-time high. Well, that is one reason leading to it. So I'll give you that. It's a sound reason. This reason is that when in a war-like situation, right, there's a lot of distress selling. So a lot of distress selling happens during that particular, because a lot of illiquid assets cannot be sold, right? So you can't sell real estate because it's off. You can't sell a lot of places. It's off, right? So distress selling in the West Asian region, where people were just selling gold at a discount, right, to get some cash and so on and so forth. That sort of that sort of breaks the gold play a little, right? So the distress selling. And then of course, when oil rises so much, right, somebody's got to pay for the margin calls, right? Because some people have made bets on it, futures on it, and so on and so forth. Now they're going to lose money, not in futures, but you get the point, right? So somebody has taken that into account, and what do you liquidate? The only asset you can actually liquidate is gold. So in a stressed sales environment, the premium asset fluctuates a little, doesn't take anything away from the macro story, doesn't take anything away from the long term prospects of the security, but it is what it is. So that is an interesting reason why people were in a haste selling their gold at a discount just to wane through the crisis, right? Crisis selling, it's called. So it's very interesting. Mr. Peeyush Sethi has a comment. With the increasing bombing of launchers, wouldn't it impede Iran's ability to continue firing missiles at the same rate as now? Well, that's what people say, right? But Iran says that they've been preparing for this moment for a very long time, right? The same moment where everything just falls apart. And one of the theories is that they've divided their defense into 8 different units, and they are all independent units, and they're going to operate in a very independent kind of a way. And then, of course, right, if the war passes on in a guerrilla fashion, right, that's when you know that things have fallen out of hand, right? The second order and third order effects of this particular play is that what happens if it becomes another Iraq or Afghanistan or something of that sort, because they do have the Strait of Hormuz, right? And if they do that, what happens to the rest of the financial world? Because 20% of oil goes from there, or at least went from there before the crisis. So that's very interesting. What needs to be seen is that how people are responding to it. A lot of people are responding to it in a lot of ways now. People are finding out land routes. People are finding out the Cape of Good Hope routes. A lot of things are happening in the financial world. Now let's come to what has happened to the Indian markets, right? So some of the things that we've been talking about the defense play. The defense play is clearly showing promise. We've been saying that the defense stocks would rise essentially when it comes to this particular play. Yeah, Mr. Vaibhav Manocha responded to Mr. Peeyush Sethi. He says that nope, Iran also has a lot of small drones and UAV, right? And that is true, absolutely true. Now, what we have been talking about is in this play, India needs to respond with a lot of defense armamry, and it needs to make new investments, and whatever those investments are should reflect in how these companies are seen as investments, right? So if you look at the Indian defense companies' stock returns, right? Defense index has outperformed in the past year amid series of conflicts. Nifty 50 from the start of West Asian conflict has returned minus 5.2%, and Nifty India index has returned 1.6%, right? Nifty 50 in 2026 is minus 8.7, while Nifty India index is 6.6%, which is a very, very big vindication of what we've been talking about for a very long time, right? And now India is essentially coming up with a three-pronged approach where they're going to be focusing on drones a lot, right? Which is yet another vindication of what we've been predicting. So people say that defense stocks are going to be riding on a sentiment wave, which is not really a fundamental wave. Nothing changes when it comes to the earnings prospects in the initial play, but in a long-term story, they are green, and that's what we've been saying. Very interestingly, Indian stocks are now much more attractive, right? The trailing PE has come to 21.2. It's down from 23, right? The premium of Indian indices has come down as compared to the rest of the markets like emerging markets, Korea and Japan, and so on and so forth, right? And that has made Indian equities more attractive, although not. This shouldn't be conflated or misconstrued as that as a signal that foreign investors are going to be buying all of a sudden, right? So that's something that we should be happy about. Now, something else that we said would be happening was Bharti Airtel, right? Now, Bharti Airtel, the Nextra thing, it's raising $1 billion, I'm sorry. $1 billion, 300 of which are going to come from Bharti, and then Alpha Wave, which is, an Abu Dhabi based investment, the deputy chief of Abu Dhabi, and then other investors. So $1 billion for Nextra. Nextra aims to have 25% of share in the data center play. Right now, it's 12.2%. What have we been saying about Airtel? What have we been saying about Bharti Group? it's proving to be right. Another thing that we've been talking about is the JSW play, JSW Steel. Jindal Steel essentially got the Jindal family as a whole when we say JSW, right? So they have gotten they've won a bid for Odisha's mine, right? Which is going to help their prospects become green a little, right? That's going to happen very interestingly. If you look at specifically what these companies have been doing when it comes to the defense play, right? Mascot Dock is still not taken up, but Solar Industries, 18.5% returns, and so on and so forth. Bharat Electronics is also doing pretty well. So a lot of things that we've been writing in the tracker, they are panning out. So Bharti's, Jindal's, defense, shipping corporation, Masgo, and so on and so forth. Let's see how that particular play plays out. We're still trying to help our fellow viewer of Thinkers Frequency pair the debt of 10 lakhs by 2 lakhs. So we've got to look at 5x. At this moment, we may be up like 30%, right? Which is not that great. We should, which is beautiful, which is incredible. But we can do more. We can try more, right? So that's what's going on. A lot of investments. Am I missing something? Yeah, we'll get to that. Now let's come to what's happening today, right? Interestingly, Ben Affleck seems to have raised $600 million for his AI-based filmmaking company. Just a few days ago, Mr. Ben Affleck had come on Joe Rogan's show, and he had been talking about how AI companies are essentially just making promises so that they can get higher valuations, they can get more money from these players, right? From the markets, while what they become is essentially a tool and not a replacement for a lot of things that they're claiming. And now, just a few months later or 2 months later, maybe a month and a half later, it's out that Ben Affleck himself has raised, Mr. Ben Affleck has raised $600 million for his AI filmmaking company. Now, it's to be seen what that company does, how that company does, and so on and so forth. Is it an implementation? Is it a validation of his thesis, which said AI tools are essentially just tools? Or is it something going to be, which is a paradigm shift, right? It's to be seen. Ben Affleck is, of course, Mr. Ben Affleck is the director of Argo, director of The Town. He was the writer of Good Will Hunting, of course, one of the greatest movies by indie people, Matt Damon, Mr. Matt Damon, Ben Affleck. And then, of course, Air, he was also the director of Air, great director, great actor, right? His best movie, my favorite movie, is Chasing Amy. So that's pretty interesting. How about data center theme companies like Wayback Thermex, NatWeg? Not a recommendation, just researching these. Yeah, so data center theme companies are also, by the way, shook a little because this particular war exposes a lot of vulnerabilities. So a lot of data centers are looking at going away from West Asia, looking at local markets like India and so on and so forth. Obviously, data centers as an opportunity in India is extraordinary. So there are some opportunities propping up, and I've asked and I've requested viewers of Thinkers Frequency to start dropping comments on the tracker that we've shared, right? And if you drop comments on the tracker, everybody will benefit from a more intelligent show. So please do that. I myself am not directly tracking a share. I can't do that, not a trader, but I'm always looking to learn something. So if you know, Mr. Sumanth Kumar says, Tech Waybag, Thermex, NetWeb, right? Not a recommendation, just researching these. We'll have to take a look. So please drop it in the comments on the tracker sheet that we've created, and we can be pretty good on it. I can try and make something on Claude related to the Thinkers Frequency tracker, right? That's also happening. So oil has passed $100 again. Street wasn't that great, 1.4% down, right? Hormuz is shut, of course. A lot of problems appearing. Very interesting troubles happened in the kitchen sector, right? Hospitality as a sector, the restaurant businesses, they started cutting orders. They've started scaling back because they found out that it will be difficult for them to take orders because of the rising LPG troubles, right? LPG is seeing troubles when it comes to supply, and if LPG falls, the supply becomes scarce and so on and so forth. The restaurants essentially go off, right? A second order effect to that was that uh, induction kitchen equipment started selling a lot on quick commerce. They started seeing months worth of sales in just couple of days, because people, as LPG becomes scarce, right, people are hoarding on induction cookers and so on and so forth. So now the third order effects of this is, as restaurants take become hard to manage because of LPG crisis, right? The food delivery apps and food delivery companies uh, start, that prospect becomes dim, right? It becomes very complicated. And if food deliveries prospects dim, right, the gig economy essentially starts fading away, or let's say fluctuates, not fading away, fluctuates is the right word. Tracker link, please, says Mr. Vaibhav Manocha. Tracker link is on the sheet. The description of this video on YouTube and also on LinkedIn. So it's everywhere. You can look at the tracker. Now that happened. So, right. So Mr. Puri, the energy person, Union Petroleum Minister, Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri, he came along and saying kitchens are safe, right? We're going to ensure that LPG supplies are all right. Now, if you look at how these things shape up, right? History as a process, not as a collection of museum pieces, you find out Strait of Hormuz gets cut, trade essentially figures out a way, a lot of things happen, people run on supplies and so on and so forth. Suddenly LPG becomes more expensive because 60% of Indian LPG, most of Indian LPG is imported. Indian production of LPG for domestic is only 10% and so on and so forth. So LPG becomes scarce. As LPG becomes scarce, the commercial guys, they falter. Kitchens, cloud kitchens, restaurants, they falter. That falters. The food delivery prospects falter. The gig economy falters, and so on and so on, right? uh, if you look at a very interesting related spiel is uh, ethanol, right? We've been talking about ethanol. Mr. Nitin Gadkari's favorite project is ethanol blending. He's been talking about E20, E28 and so on, eventually E100. He's been saying, and due to his policies and his ideas, India has a surplus ethanol production, right? And that ethanol production is not being used because of this particular play. Uh, you know, because E20 itself was pushed back so much on social media and so on, because people said that they are losing out on car efficiencies, knocking troubles, and engine problems, and so on and so forth. The government said a lot of it is fugazi, but still a lot of pushback happened. So E28 hasn't happened. Since E28 hasn't happened, ethanol, the surplus ethanol we are creating, it's not getting used, right? Or there are questions on how it will get used. Well, ethanol could be used for cooking, or as a cooking fuel, right? Because it's clean, it leads to a lot of, it doesn't lead to harmful emissions. The only thing it gives is like CO2 and water vapors and so on and so forth. So it's actually a much cleaner fuel, and if it's incorporated in kitchen, uh, you know, cooking, it leads to yet another fillip to the whole ethanol story. And with that fillip, India essentially decreases its dependence on foreign imports, because crude is essentially the biggest thing that drains our exchequer, right? The country's exchequer. So, how interesting is all of this? So, do you think ethanol blending companies will be able to rally the country to use ethanol in cooking, right? Because if that happens, that will be a paradigm shift, which essentially solves a lot of problems for the country, financially, environmentally, and then also fiscally, right? For, I mean, domestic consumption and so on and so forth. So that's what's happening. Very interesting times. Uh, uh, let's move on. So US has said that they're going to be investigating foreign trade practices, unreasonable, discriminatory, and harms its commerce. US on Monday or on Sunday essentially came out that it's giving a waiver to India to buy Russian fuel, right? Russian crude because of whatever's going on in West Asia. A month-long waiver. India then said that we have never taken permission from anybody for buying fuel. Became a whole political rigmarole. That's what happened. Now US says 16 countries are going to be analyzed on what they are doing when it comes to their trade practices. So what do they mean by trade practices? Let's say India has a lot of protections in place to preserve its steel industry, right? Because we can't let China essentially steamroll our entire steel industry, right? That will be very bad for us. Now, when we are doing that, what happens? Uh, how is that to be looked at by people who are importing Indian steel? If they are, like, America has its own guardrails for American steel, right? They want steel as the arsenal of democracy, as Mr. Peter Navarro said. So what happens to America's view on India's? Is it a discriminatory because they're shielding their own empire, their own country? They're providing subsidies, they're providing incentives, and so on and so forth. And these kinds of incentives are working across industries, right? And if those incentives are essentially out competing American products, that leads to a trade imbalance, which causes problems. That's what they are looking at, right? So their probe is covering steel, aluminium, auto, batteries, electronics, chemicals, machinery, solar modules, and so on and so forth. That's pretty interesting. Let's move on. India has excess capacity production, claims USTR. China, EU also under lens. Now, the at home, what are we gonna see if this particular thing plays out is retail inflation, right? Retail inflation has climbed to 3.21% in February. March is gonna be even harder, right? Because uh, fuel, right? Fuel essentially determines what inflation looks like. Fuel is the bedrock upon which everything flies. If fuel is cheap, transportation becomes cheap. If transportation becomes cheap, the things become cheap. And if things become cheap, consumption becomes great, and so on and so forth. Right now, fuel is getting expensive, as you see, LPG and so on and so forth. All of these things are obviously going to lead to inflation. Although the food play is still pretty dominant, everything is pretty much in control. Inflation targets 4%, still pretty much in control. So, but this takes away the case for RBI to cut down on rates, right? RBI wouldn't be able to cut down on rates any longer. I mean, it's out of question, right? Interest rates are to be cut down when inflation is in control. If it cuts down interest rates, more cash is going to come to the markets. Inflation is going to rise up further. If that happens, everything is going to get screwed, right? So no rate cuts by RBI, but inflation rates are going up. Now, if inflation rates start going up, that's when India will essentially have to make sure that Indian currency starts playing catch up. Right now, Indian rupee essentially is looking at 92.10, 92.20. RBI is buying a lot of bonds at you know at a market premium, like whatever market has, they're buying it at a premium so that the yields fall off, and so on and so forth. They are intervening to make sure that the rupee stays intact. But obviously it's going to be very, very difficult, because there's going to be a lot of selling of Indian rupee to get dollars, and so on and so forth. Also, they have a new regulation where they're asking banks to have a forex kind of a information sharing. Like in Indian bank, they need to know their foreign banks who are hedging on rupees or who are basically shorting rupees. That particular play needs to be available. Those information pieces need to be available to RBI so that they can manage whatever is happening with rupee volatility. Right now, what happens is, let's say an Indian bank is there, and then there's a New York play and there's a London play, and they're shorting the rupee forwards and so on and so forth. If they're doing that, RBI doesn't have any control. So the banks say that we can't do anything about it. We can't provide that information because those things are impossible, and providing it on a daily basis, it's just, so the banks are resisting that play. But RBI is coming that we need to know how rupee is being dealt with. So let's see how that happens. For now, rupee is essentially in trouble. If rupee is in trouble, a lot of things, right? Uh, of course, exports become easier, but if inflation starts rising up, then rupee falling isn't good news. By the way, speaking of exports, right? Pharma as a sector, along with defense, has only gained as of now, but farmers' prospects are looking bleak right now. Why? Because whatever they are importing, so they import 90% of APIs from China, right? That particular play has also gotten affected, right? The API costs are high, and then of course the uh, shipping costs for the export play, that's also hurting them. So the pharma sector, the generic trader guys who are essentially, I mean, Indian pharma companies who are essentially traders, uh, not really pharma innovation hubs, they're gonna feel a little bit stretched in times to come, is what my reading of the situation is. Let's see how that particular thing plays out. Speaking of pharma, Monjaro, the Novo Nordisk's drug, is essentially uh, uh, the semaglutide, right? Right now, the tirzepatide, which is the Eli Lilly's drug, that's hitting it big, right? Uh, Novo Nordisk drug is also catching up. So in the field, it has gotten about 20-25% share. The patent expires on March 21st. Let's see what happens to the market then. There is a lot of problems when it comes to syringes and so on and so forth. Those kinds of materials, they are also coming out with oral drugs. Let's see how that particular thing plays out with what we have believed is a good bet, Shelley Engineering, right? If the oral GLP drugs move forward and the injectables essentially come down as a market share, as a growth percentage, right? Then Shelly wouldn't be a good bet. So please note that. I'm gonna write that down in the tracker as well. So there goes the pharma play. Of course, auto components and so on and so forth, they are also looking at. uh, Speaking of auto, electric car companies are looking at selling to corporates, right? Because of the financial year closing. So if expenses are made before March 31, before the books are closed, it leads to a lot of tax saving and so on and so forth. Car companies are selling in that way, right? They're growing 44%, although at a small base. Right now, electric cars are about 1 lakh sales in a month, in a year, if I'm not wrong. That's a very small base, right? But that's growing pretty fast. In February, I guess they sold 13,000 cars. Uh, I hope that wasn't just one company I'm quoting. So let me check. How much do you guess is total electric cars sales in India? Now, this should be easy to compute. I don't have to look it up. I can calculate. Would you like to calculate it with me? Right? How many electric cars must India be selling right now? Right? That is the question. So, a way to calculate is like if you're starting to think live, uh, electric cars as a percentage of the entire automotive play, the market share of electric cars is about uh, how much is it? Is it 2%? Is it 4%? Let's say it's 4%, right? It was 2% earlier. I guess it's 4% now. So 4%. And how many total cars is India buying right now? It's about 4 million, right? 40 lakhs? 3 to 4%, 4%, 3% of 40 lakhs. 40 lakhs, 1% would, 10% would be 4 lakhs. 1% would be 40,000, right? 4% would be 1 lakh 60, 1 lakh. So about 1.2 lakhs is what electric cars are selling in India. If you know the data points, it could be very nice. A nice exercise to calculate, right? So that's what they're doing. So on daily basis, we can predict around 3 each day. 3 each day? How did you come to that? 3 each day would be just 90 cars in a month, Mr. Vaibhav Manocha. No. I hope, but I've said it, so now you can think upon it. I'll take a sip till then, right? I'll pour some hot water in it so that you can absorb that particular bit. What we did was we found out the total number of cars selling in India. Then we had an estimation of the market share of electric cars. And then we just figured out, and that number is absolutely right, right? In February, they sold about 13,000. So you can extrapolate the entire play, right? I hope you're having fun with the simultaneous sip, right? Speaking of electric, the phone market is essentially looking at a real troubled scene. What has happened in the phone marketplace is that Chinese companies are backing out of the retail networks and they are going back to the online only strategy. Why are they doing that? To save money. They say the distribution costs come at around 25 to 30% when it comes to retail, right? Offline retail. The distribution costs are at around 12 to 15% when it comes to online. So if it's 12 to 15% online, we'll have to save money by going online, and we'll basically reduce the margins. Improve the margins so we can still keep the cost low. Now, why are they thinking so much about cost? Because the memory costs have gone up by a lot, right? So if memory costs have gone up, they're already in a severe pressure. Phone sales have sort of plateaued and they're falling off. So from 151 million, 150 million, it's going to come down to 145, 146 million and so on. Mr. Vaibhav Manocha says, no logic. I should have been more mindful. No, that's okay. It's an exercise, right? That's why we call it a weekly mental workout. We used to do it daily, but weekly mental workout essentially helps us a lot in this way. So let's move forward. So we've covered phones, we've covered pharma, we've covered auto, we've covered Airtel, we've covered the steel investments, we've covered the data center play, the AI investments, and so on and so forth, right? Let's move forward, folks. How are you liking the episode? So what I did this time, you remember I take a look at everything I'm saying at the end. So I just try to memorize all of it and then pour it down. That was what I tried in order to be smoother, faster, more data heavy when it comes to the session, right? I'm sure I'm missing out on a few key details which I'll try to cover at the end. But yeah, I think I'm doing better today than usual, right? Drone Force, Defense Geospatial Agency, Data Force, and so on and so forth. Sudarshan Chakra Project, 2030 to 2040. I've already talked about that. The most interesting part is that India is spending somewhere around 73 to 90 billion dollars, and about 29,000 crores is what goes in R&D, which is not a lot of money, right? So that money will have to be well spent, and especially as all wars are saying, all of it will have to go towards, a lot of it will have to go towards drones, right? So very interesting. Let's move on, folks. Alternative sources in play to meet peak power demand. India has added 4.6 gigawatt of wind energy, 3.3 hydro, and 700 megawatt of nuclear power capacity this fiscal year till January, right? Shortfall from gas-fired energy pegged near 8 to 10 gigawatts. Peak demand likely to be 271 gigawatts, right? So 271 gigawatts. We have been doing a lot of renewable energy. That sort of thing is going to kick up. Let's see how that fares in times to come. Let's move on, folks. I hope I'm not missing out on any key detail here. No. The nuclear play, small nuclear reactors are also taking, the government is feeling it from the private sector, from the Shanti bill that has essentially, opened doors for nuclear energy. Let's move on. Packaged food companies / production. Fertilizer companies have taken a break, right? So they have an annual maintenance play which begins from March and so on and so forth. They are preempting that. So fertilizer companies, in order to, because they're not getting the input supplies, right? So if they don't get it, what do? The LPG thing. So they are basically putting the plant on maintenance play right now so that this particular crisis can wane, right? The metals guys have been doing very well, by the way. The Vedantas of the world, they have been very good. Let's move on, folks. which is what we said, by the way, last week. If you remember, I told you, and that's exactly what's happening. Let's move on. Active consumer base, LPG. Why is LPG's problems biting India? Because India has been Har Ghar Kitchen and so on and so forth, right? The LPG active consumer base has more than doubled in a decade. PMUI Ujjwala Yojana, that beneficiary play has literally doubled the consumption and production. So production as a percentage is of course very low. Let's move on. We've talked about this enough. Yeah. Supreme Court has asked RERA to pull its socks. We've talked about that. Axle leaders have joined Rapido's $600 million fund. Rapido is expanding in its only business, right? Which is only, what is it called? How's it pronounced? I'm not sure. But it's a rival to Zomato and Swiggy's food delivery play. They're trying to do what they did to the cab aggregation business by rolling out the subscription and so on and so forth. Let's see what happens. So they're being valued at 3 billion, raising 600 million. Let's see what happens to them. Amazon and Flipkart are of course scaling up their quick commerce networks, right? Flipkart says their Flipkart Minutes is going to have about 1200 dark stores from 750 this month, right? Taking it at par with Zepto and Swiggy. So, and then of course Amazon is also in the fray. Big Basket, Amazon, Flipkart, Zomato, Swiggy, and Blinkit. 6 players in the fray. You know what happens to this market, right? You know what happens to this market? It gets screwed. Eternal is putting in money. Let's move on. I hope you are being able to rewind the episode today. The DVR setting is working. Mr. Bhavik Shah and everybody else who had that problem, I had gotten that feedback from a lot of people, but hope that is not a problem anymore. Let's move on. Crude supplies diverted. We have talked about that enough. Capgemini is planning a 15,000 seat development center in Vishakhapatnam. GCCs, by the way, are going heavy on Hyderabad, and they are not going heavy on Bangalore anymore. They say most of the GCCs which are making plans are going to Hyderabad. Hyderabad infrastructure is pretty good. Bangalore is an absolute shithole. It's an unlivable city. Its roads are choked and it's unfixable also. The design is such that you can't do anything about Bangalore, right? It's basically a total shithole, right? But in Hyderabad, not so much. And GCCs are taking that up. GCCs are also going tier 2, which is very good news. Let's move on, folks. Indigo's chief got fired, Ebers, right? So if you remember when the Indigo crisis happened, a lot of influencers started writing posts on how government has screwed up. And if you've been watching Thinkers Frequency, you would remember I said it's not the government's fault this time. I mean, it's a good idea to blame Babus for everything under the sun, right? They are responsible for everything bad that happens to the country, but not this time. This is totally on Indigo. That's what I said, right? Because the whole communication was so that, you know, the government directives had come long back and so on and so forth. This was not on the government, and that gets proven, right? The co-founder, I'm missing out on his name, I'm sorry. He's Rahul Bhatia, Mr. Bhatia. Yeah, he said, "Main hu na," right? This shouldn't have happened. I'm back. So he's interim CEO. He had gotten this particular CEO with a lot of fervor in 2022. He had handed his keys saying that you're responsible for the global expansion of Indigo. He had beaten a West Asian airline to get this guy. But as soon as this November thing happened, he was unceremoniously fired. So once again, our reading of the situation got proved to be right in hindsight, right? This reminds me of that beautiful joke that I keep telling. I mean, it's beautiful to me. I don't know if anybody laughs. It's that African lady in hindsight. What did I tell you? Didn't I tell you? What happened? Exactly what I told you. And when did I say it would happen? A long time ago. And so on and so forth. Let's move on, folks. We've talked about how the Western European car companies have uh, gotten screwed by Chinese companies like Aston Martin, Chrysler, right? $25 billion loss. A lot of companies firing. Volkswagen firing thousands and thousands of people, tons of thousands of people, right? All of those people are firing. Now China has come to the other market. It's the electric truck market, right? And their things are priced at like 3,000 euros cheaper than whatever these people have been doing. And that onslaught will essentially grow to the trucking business. Now, trucking business is huge, right? It's big, and for especially for European automotive, it's big. And now they're gonna be screwed without, uh, you know, without ends, man. So European car companies, they continue to fall, exactly as we told you. So if we would have shorted, European car companies, since we've been talking, we would have been very, very good. If you would have, let's say, bought a few puts, right? A couple of $1 million in puts, we would have been huge, huge. By the way, speaking of puts, Dr. Burry says he has accomplished everything. He says Palantir is screwed. Let's see Palantir share price, by the way. 1 month up 18%, 6 months down 10%. So his short essentially was covered, but let's say 6 months in the last year still 81%. So Palantir has not really fallen. It's gaining ground actually. What happened to Nvidia? Nvidia has not grown in 6 months. 1 month 2%. So his stock, his call had done well for a while, but now Palantir is up again, maybe because of the war situation. Now, Dr. Burry has said that Palantir doesn't have a software layer of its own. It's just a services company, and it shouldn't get the premium. Let's see what happens. It's a developing story, very, very nicely done. He was great at what he did. Let's move on, folks. AkzoNobel is renaming the brand. JSW Paints making progress. Business rejigs, layoffs drive up demand for outplacement firms. Outplacement firms are those guys who essentially, when people are getting fired, they career transitioning guys. They call themselves career transitioners, right? So they help you find other jobs and so on and so forth. Now these guys are gaining ground, right? The companies in this domain are Randstad. Randstad has a division. Randstad is, of course, a big. Manpower Group is also, just like Randstad, a very big play. Manpower Group has a specialty unit called Right Management, which is a career transitioning play. My brother worked at Right Management. So these guys are seeing 60% growth, right? They say they have not seen this kind of growth in a decade. So outplacement guys are winning when people are getting fired. If you want to watch a real movie, good movie on outplacement as a play, there's a good movie with George Clooney. Mr. George Clooney did Up in the Air. It was a fine movie on this, very nice movie. Up in the Air. When did it come out? 2009. Good movie. Who was the director of Up in the Air? Jason Reitman. I see. Nice. Good. Remembered. Good movie. Anyway, the outplacement guys are doing well. Let's move on, folks. Boom, boom, boom. NSE is hiring 8 law firms and 20 investment bankers to go public. 8 law firms. It's basically hiring all the top law firms. Top 8. How interesting is that, folks? New liquid coverage ratio norms could help banks expand credit by 7%. Right? Rules are giving them the liquidity coverage ratio norms. They are freeing up some capital. This capital is getting freed because surplus liquidity parked in low yield liquid assets could be redeployed into loans. Now this is going to lead to loan and deposit ratio up of 4% to 11%. Right? Public sector banks 6 to 11%. Loan to deposit ratio when it goes up, obviously good news for banks, right? If deposit growth stays steady. So if deposit growth is okay, they will have good news in their hands. But why would deposit growth go up, right? If markets go down, deposit growth will sustain. If markets go up, deposit growth will go down. So let's look at that. Let's move on, folks. Mhm. A lot of money is going away from IT, of course, away from and into capital goods, into capex goods, capex companies, and so on, capex based companies, and so on. Right? Why do you think so? Why do you think companies are going? I mean, the investors, the foreign investors, are putting money into these, you know, cement, construction players, and so on and so forth. Because these depend on government capex, right? And when everything is falling off, the government capex will sustain. If the government capex sustains, right, that will be a good bet. That's what these people are saying, which is good. MNC banks resist RBI plan to access offshore deal data on the forex play. We've talked about that, right? They want to control the rupee. Let's move on. We've talked about retail inflation, overseas crypto earnings. Yeah, that's okay. Banks urged to devise low interest loans for retail and MSME clients. We've heard that a lot. So, safety advisory and so on and so forth. Yeah, that's good. We're moving pretty fast, I guess. Right? Good engagement. Not a lot of people actually watch Thinker's Frequency, much to my dismay. But whoever watches, we have like a watch rate, average watch duration of 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and so on and so forth, which is just extraordinary, right? Just huge. Just pretty good. So, how long has it been for us? Let me look at. I can't see. Yeah. Should have been an hour approximately. We're doing very well. So there is a news on Reliance building a US refinery with $300 billion deal. $300 billion deal is like typical Trump headline. Reliance is worth $100 billion. It's going to be a big refinery. Why is Reliance chosen for this particular project? Why is Reliance looking at investing? Because Reliance has perfected a SAR grade kind of a refinery play, right? SAR grade refinery. And the crude that US is going to get from Venezuela is SAR grade. So this is going to be, an Indian foray into the US refinery play, which helps Venezuelan oil gets and the harvesting of it. So it's very interesting. America First Refining thanks the company for investing. It's going to be a huge deal, right? This particular refinery, the estimated value of the whole thing, $175 billion, right? 50 billion gallon of refined products, including gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel, and so on and so forth. The output, processing agreement, 1.2 barrels of US shale oil will be processed over 20 years, 60 million barrels of US crude, and so on and so forth. So that is huge. Refineries are going to benefit if crude goes up. Oil marketing companies are not going to benefit. It must be reflected, right? Let's look at IOCL stock. IOCL stock should be in the toilet in the last few days. No, it's not. Yeah, it is actually 10% down since the last month. Although it's still 6 months, it's up 10%. Not that bad. BPCL. Let's look at BPCL stock, folks. 1 month, it's down 13%. 6 months, still up 2%. So yeah, since the last month, they've really fallen off. Whenever crude goes up, oil marketing companies' margins squeezed, they fall. Refineries, they go up, right? This is a simple. The world is so predictable. To the viewers of Thinker's Frequency, right? How is that? I mean, isn't that so cool? Oh no, did I just switch off my LinkedIn? Oh, I'm sorry, folks. Yeah, I'm back. I hope that was okay. So, isn't that so cool to be able to predict with such accuracy? Right? You don't even have to look at something like this is gonna happen, and it does. It's so awesome. Let's move on, folks. Oh yeah, there's a press note 3 thing. India is looking at sort of easing money inflow. They want to attract FDI, right? And a big impediment to Indian FDI story was the blockading of Chinese investment, right? So earlier, even if there is a foreign entity and they had a Chinese uh, investor, or let's say a shareholder, even if it was less than 10%, right? It used to get reviewed, right? Now they have taken that away. If an entity has less than 10% foreign Chinese shareholding, they're letting it go. They're going to be approving it faster. So this is once again a move on India's side to spur up some FDI, which is very important, right? Now, this is a separate story from the joint venture story that India is trying to get. Like, India wants a lot of Chinese intelligence when it comes to, you know, electronics manufacturing, electronics component manufacturing, and so on and so forth, right? India needs that money. And India needs that intelligence. So this particular thing is slightly different from that. That is also looking greener, but an FDI move, how much difference do you think it'll make? Because earlier, whoever had Chinese links, they were reviewed in a very specific way. Now, 60 days approval window and so on and so forth. This should lead to some good tech deals and so on and so forth. Let's move forward, folks. Companies have been told to not promote GLP drugs through ads, right? But do you think it makes any sense? I mean, do you think it's just a notification for the sake of it, or do you think it leads to any significant, difference to how these things are getting promoted? Let's say there's covert advertising, right? Covert advertising is already doing everything for these companies, right? Why would they need to depend on ads? Like, even this particular play, this reads like a PR piece, right? This is courts have told not to promote through ads, though there are a lot of aspects, this is that, and so on and so forth. People, no news is good news, especially for GLP. Nothing will stop them from growing 10x in the next 2 years. In fact, the next year. Let's move on, folks. A very interesting case happened, folks. An Antrix and Devas case. Dutch Supreme Court said that you'll have to pay 111 million. Indian Supreme Court had said that the contract was illegal. Contract was null and void. So the Indian company wouldn't have to pay. But the Dutch Supreme Court has essentially, so what they're going to do now is that Indian assets in Netherlands will be seized to get that award. That is pretty interesting. Two different Supreme Courts having two different readings of the situation. Court of Arbitration award to Devas, that is Devas Multimedia America Company. In 2005 era satellite dispute between ISRO's commercial arm Antrix. So that was what it was. The Indian court said that the deal itself was invalid, but that court has essentially given it away. So lawyers made money, and then of course those people are going to get it out. Let's move on, folks. Product list for PN3 will be out, which is good. Private sector optimism at high. We've talked about defense stocks. Housing projects. Kitchens going electric. We've talked about that. Domestic travel gaining because foreign travel is in trouble. No surprise there. Domestic travel is gaining. Good time for Indian hotels. Let's look at Indian hotels, folks. Indian hotel stock. It should be doing well, right? Because a lot of those West Asian folks must be. By the way, in a very interesting second order effect, the airlines went to the toilet, right? But the private jet guys, the private jet, the carriers, the charter planes, they really benefit. They're making money like never before. Let's look at Indian hotels stock. They should be doing well, I think. Yeah, 5 days up 3%. 1 month down 12%. Holy shit. No, not doing well apparently. Any other stock? Hotel stock. Is it the sector problem or is it hotel stock? Let's look at it. Very interesting. I can't see any other stock for now. But yeah, hotel stock, I mean, should be. So just when you think about it, because of a lot of flux, because of whatever is happening, the there should be an influx from people in UAE, and that should lead to hotel companies getting a temporary, sort of speculative high, but that doesn't seem to have panned out as I was thinking. Maybe I'm missing out on something. Am I what am I must be missing out on? Can you guess, folks? Anyway, let's move on. And obviously, domestic travel gets up, so even that should have helped the hotel. Maybe there's an angle to Indian hotels specifically, which is to be seen because the stock is in the toilet, right? 20%. I've always said got to be stay away from hotel stock because there are some fundamental weaknesses. If you remember, we've always been saying that, but somehow there should have been a speculative high. Not happened. Let's move on, folks. FDI. Yeah. A very big investor has sold PB Infotech stock, Policy Bazaar guys, right? What happens to aggregators or let's say price comparison guys with Claude and with AI doing price comparison? I mean, you can literally make it on your own if you want. So what happens to these guys? Do they actually fall off? Because their value gets diluted, right? So what happens to the price comparison players and aggregators and so on and so forth? Wouldn't it be just simpler to book things with primary websites, primary providers, and just make an agent of your own who does that? Because that's the first case of use case of AI, right? But anyway, let's move forward, folks. Public sector banks doing better than private players in credit growth, as always, right? Let's move on. Yeah. Cred got payment aggregator license. Yeah, it did. It did. Man, Cred is the most hilarious company. Absolutely hilarious. Raised so much of money. For what? For what? We talked about this. I wrote a post on Cred, right, couple of years ago. It got like 2 million views, right? 2 million. Like people really connected with it. The crux of that was if Mr. Kunal Shah is such an influencer in the VC market, right? If he can actually rally investors to such a degree that he can just raise money, he's a fundraising machine, right? Despite whatever happened to Free Charge, turned out to be a shit deal for Snapdeal. That venture is basically off. It didn't accomplish anything, but fundraising wise, it was a great outcome for the investors, right? And him. So if he's such a good fundraiser, why not make something valuable? Why not make something actually impactful? Like, what is the value of providing the rich people some 4 rupee cashbacks and wasting their time? It's just unbelievable. Anyway, let's move on, folks. IT companies looking at 3.5% revenue deflation. We've been very, very good, very prescient when it comes to IT companies' future, right? The market was late to understand that. We had it first. Let's move on, folks. Kedara Capital is selling its Universal Nutriscience for 3,000 crore. India is an $8 billion nutraceuticals market. Globally, nutraceuticals is a $500 billion market, I guess. I think it is, right? India should be a 520. Yeah, the world over, it's $520 billion worth of market. India is an $8 billion market, and Kedara is selling its unit. A lot of M&E is gonna happen in the nutraceuticals play. Just let's wait. Let's move on, folks. So, rail and road projects are kicking in. That's okay. Social media company. By the way, an Indian state essentially banned 16-year-old kids from accessing social media. They've like literally banned. So it's all going as Seneca's open pitch wrote, right? The legal system. 1865, cocaine got invented. 1914, 1915, it got outlawed, right? But that didn't matter because other drugs took its place. So you need to replace the whole play. How awesome would it be to actually have a phone which is not distracting you all the time, right? Unfortunately, Seneca couldn't get made, but let's hope something comes up. Let's move on, folks. That's Andhra Pradesh, says Mr. Sumanth Kumar. That's your state, Mr. Kumar. Let's move on, folks. Indian aluminium stocks have been lifted. We talked about it. Drug costs may surge up 30%. We've talked about it. Paint makers are obviously gonna get screwed, right? Oil linked account for about third. So oil, crude is about third of all input costs, the bill of materials when it comes to paint guys. That's gonna hurt them. Fertilizer companies, of course, shutdowns. We've talked about that. Let's move on, folks. India is a little less expensive, but don't yet make it that all money is going to come to India. Yeah, we've talked about that. So now we'll just 1 second, folks. I hope I'm not missing out on anything. If you have questions, you can shoot them till I just ensure that I'm not missing out a key data point, right? Gold, we've talked about that. Oh yeah, there could be shrinkflation, folks. So India has been running a very big campaign when it comes to ensuring that domestic consumption goes up, right? The GST plan was to spur up domestic consumption. Domestic consumption is very important for the country. If domestic consumption goes up, private capex goes up, private capex goes up, domestic consumption goes up. That's the play. So India did a lot of things, personal tax rationalization, GST rationalization to bring down the cost of things, right? And that led to great outcomes. But with this whole play, the FMCG players might be looking at shrinkflation. They might be shrinking packets to accommodate for the rise of crude price. Why? Because 12 to 15% of all FMCG plays, 15 to 20% of all FMCG bill of material goes to packaging, right? Who would know? 12 to 15 to 20% of all FMCG costs are just packaging, right? And that is directly affected by crude price. And when that is affected by crude price, it goes for a toss. So you might just be looking at shrinkflation yet again. So India's, the government's hopes for keeping the domestic consumption high might just get a bump in the road. Let's see. Let's move on, folks. This was very important. Yeah, I'm not missing out on anything, thankfully. Bank stocks essentially had a very interesting outcome, right? Maharashtra farm loan waiver happened, right? Farm loan waiver actually spooked the entire banking market. If other states follow this particular thing, it's going to be very, very tough for the banking. So they fell off. Let's see how that particular thing plays out. Related to banking, there was an insider trading case related to Yes Bank. Yes Bank's, all the executives who were in question for the insider trading, they all pleaded guilty. 2 of them are still fighting because there were some leaks when it came to this particular play. The Chinese walls, as they say, they didn't make it for him. So that was a very interesting case. What's happening with Yes Bank's executives and the insider trading case, right? It's very fascinating how these people are being able to track the insider trading. It's so hard to track, like intuitively, how hard it is actually to see what's happening when it comes to insider trading, right? Let's say if you are an executive, you have privileged information, you talk to somebody in the company, and then you go out and you talk to somebody who makes that connection, and they're being able to derive that link happened here, and they're being able to prove. It's just very fascinating. Just happened in Yes Bank, and it's always fascinating to read these cases. Very, very nice. By the way, Wipro is also foraying into chip assembly. OSAT, of course, outsourced, assembly and testing play, sourcing, assembly and testing plant. This is once again an big IT's move to diversify away from their core business. You will see a lot of it. So HCL is one. Tata is of course doing that already. Wipro is also in. Then there's other players who are thinking about this. This is just going to happen as we go along, right? IT's original business model is in great trouble, and there's no saving it. Let's move on, folks. Amazon rerouting their West Asia data center to India. We've talked about that. Chinese and phone companies, Airtel Nextra. In Nepal, somebody called Mr. Balendra became the prime minister. He used to be a rapper, man. That gives me hope as a musician. Anyway, DOT may stick to 5% of charge for SATCOM, right? Try wanted 4%, right? But they have said 5% and 1% discount for remote areas, right? Not giving 4% AGR. So not such a good news for SATCOM players, but it's not going to make much of a difference, right? Novo Nordisk semaglutide gains weight. Manjaro, we've talked about that. Durandar is coming out on 18th. I'm going to be watching. Are you? Let's move on. EC price is going to rise. That's obvious. Let's move on, folks. Capex by CPSEs is going to be up. Stainless steel companies, they say they're going to be going heavy. Till 2030, they're going to be doubling their output, need protection. Let's see what happens there. We've talked about that. Medical tourism is also getting hit, by the way. From a lot of it happens from the Gulf, medical tourism, and that's not being happening. You would think that if things are so bad, they'll find reasons to go out of their country, come to India. That's not happening, apparently. So Indian medical tourism fraternity is trying to find replacement of those guys. Bad news is that these people are very, very rich, right? So they book premium rooms and so on and so forth. A lot of good, they are a good market, but India is trying to go to Europe, Africa and so on and so forth for the medical tourism to fill the gap. They make up to 25% of the entire medical tourism fray. Medical tourism is very important, right? 60 to 80% surgeries, cheaper than West Asia. So India is a very good market. Medical tourism is going to change everything when it comes to hospital business. That's why you're looking at Indian hospitals seeing so much of action, right? Because we're very cheap. That's going to stay. The rise in cost, it's not going to be great, and it's going to attract the entire world to get treated in India, right? So let's move on. It's going to bring in a lot of dollars as well. Let's move on, folks. Chips, by the way, right? India is saying the third largest import after crude, chips, and that's basically making India, like, you got to start making PCBs and stuff. So let's see how that particular thing plays out. LPGs prices are affecting hotels, says Mr. Sumukh. Well, we've already talked about that. We had a very good discussion on it. Yeah, we talked about it, Mr. Sumukh. 2 million monthly orders for house help services. Urban Clap, Urban Company, Snabit, Pronto, all of these people are getting a lot of orders for the household help thing. That's the high frequency use case of these apps. Urban Clap's stock is down 40% from the time it went public, right? Why? Because this particular market, the house help market, is the high frequency market. If it gets screwed, right, the long tail gets screwed. Whoever gets this has a high touch relationship with a customer, and high touch, high frequency relationship will alter or affect everything else that the company is trying to sell, right? So this is like a loss leader. This could be a loss leader for a company, and that's what urban companies fearing, that if other companies are being able to lead the fray when it comes to this particular service, it could be very bad news. How would an urban company fare in this particular fight? I'm all positive. I'm very, very positive on urban company, of course. You know it, right? At the end of the day, it's all about management. Companies betting on the team, right? Betting on management. An urban company has a phenomenal management. All three co-founders are extraordinarily nice people, and they're gonna figure it out. So yeah, with that, we come to the end of 211th episode of Thinkers Frequency, our weekly mental workout, our weekly dose of insights and analysis that don't lead to paralysis right before we punch in. It's 9:50, we're gonna punch in 9:51, we're gonna punch in anytime. I wish you a beautiful week, personally and professionally. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll see you next Friday, same place, same time, hopefully. Please take care and see you. I should thank Mr. M Naughty for you. And the handle is actually M Naughty for you. Mr. Vaibhav Manocha, Mr. Tushar Tiwari, Mr. Peeyush Sethi, Mr. Sumanth Kumar, joining us from Britain. And everybody else who joined, Mr. Sumukh, and everybody else who joined. I hope you had fun. I hope it was valuable. It was definitely a lot of value to me. It was a lot of fun. Thank you for joining. See you again. Bye-bye.